My fiancé cheated and ruined our wedding, so I married the best man instead. Not exactly the fairy tale ending I'd planned while assembling ivory place cards and arguing with my mother about centerpieces, but honestly, best decision I ever made. 3 days before I was supposed to say I do to David, my phone buzzed with a text that wasn't meant for me. Funny how 5 seconds can demolish 5 years. His message appeared below a photo of us from our engagement party, my smile so wide it hurt, his arm around my waist. I remember staring at that notification, my thumb hovering over it, this weird pressure building in my chest like something was about to explode. Can't wait to see you tonight? D won't suspect a thing. Same hotel as last time? D? That's me, Danielle. The unsuspecting fiancé who'd spent the last 8 months planning a wedding for a man who apparently couldn't wait 3 more days to keep it in his pants. The room tilted. My lungs forgot how breathing worked. You know that feeling when your body goes cold but your face burns hot? Like your blood can't decide which direction it should be flowing? That's betrayal physically manifesting in your nervous system. It's a bitch. I didn't scream. I didn't throw my phone. Instead, I sat perfectly still on our bed, our fucking bed, while my brain scrambled to make sense of what I was seeing. Maybe it was a joke? A wrong number? A test from one of my paranoid bridesmaids? But deep down I knew. You always know, don't you? There's always that little voice you've been ignoring, that twist in your gut when he's late coming home or suddenly needs privacy for phone calls. I'd buried those feelings beneath seating charts and veil options. I scrolled back through his messages, nothing suspicious, which meant he deleted conversations regularly. This was just the one time he'd slipped up. My hands trembled as I pulled up his location history. Yes, we shared locations because we were so fucking trusting and in love. Or so I thought. The Westlake Hotel, every Thursday for the past 3 months, from roughly 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. Business meetings, he'd said. Client dinners for the promotion he was chasing. Client dinners, that's what we're calling it now? The systematic dismantling of your future sounds like shattering glass inside your head. Every plan, every dream, every imagined moment of your life together, clink, crack, crash, falling in pieces around you. Our honeymoon in Bali. The house we'd put a deposit on. The children's names we'd tentatively agreed upon. All of it, suddenly fiction. I called Alex first. Not my mother, not my sister, but Alex. David's best friend since college, his best man. Why him? Maybe because he always saw through David's bullshit, even when I couldn't. Maybe because he was the only person who loved David almost as much as I did, who would understand the magnitude of this betrayal without immediately telling me to burn all of David's possessions in the front yard. My voice didn't sound like mine when he answered. It was steady, hollow, like it was coming from somewhere outside my body. I told him what I'd found. The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. He knew. The realization hit like a second betrayal. My stomach clenched as Alex sighed deeply on the other end of the line. Not surprised, not shocked, just resigned, as if the inevitable had finally happened. Have you ever felt your heart literally ache, like someone squeezing it too hard, wringing it out like a dish rag? That's what happened when Alex finally spoke, confirming what his silence had already told me. Yes, he knew. He'd caught David with someone at a work function months ago. David had sworn it was a one-time mistake, promised he'd ended it, begged Alex not to tell me with the wedding so close. The wedding, 237 guests, $83,000. Invitations sent, hotel blocks reserved, dress altered to perfection. My father's retirement fund tapped for the venue deposit. All for a lie. I hung up on Alex mid-apology. Not because I was angry at him, though part of me was, but because a strange calm was settling over me. The kind that comes after the initial shock, when your brain shifts from emotional overload to cold, calculating survival mode. I poured myself 3 fingers of the expensive scotch David had been saving for our wedding night. It burned going down, but I welcomed the pain, something external to match the internal bleeding. Then I did something I still can't fully explain. I drove to the Westlake Hotel. No confrontation planned. No screaming scene. I just needed to see it. The place where my future had been systematically dismantled, one Thursday evening at a time. The lobby gleamed with marble and soft lighting. I wondered if the receptionist could tell I was falling apart, or if my exterior looked as numb as I felt. I sat in one of those oversized leather chairs, ordered a martini I couldn't taste, and watched the elevators. Would I recognize her if I saw her? Would something in me just know, hey, that's the woman my fiancé broke me for? An hour passed, then another. The martini glass emptied was replaced, emptied again. My phone buzzed repeatedly with texts from David, wondering where I was, saying he was heading home from his meeting soon. Each notification sent fresh acid through my veins. And then, as if summoned by my darkest thoughts, the elevator doors opened, and there he was. My future husband, laughing, his hand resting intimately on the lower back of a woman I'd never seen before. She was beautiful in that effortless way that made my 8 months of pre-wedding dieting seem suddenly pathetic. They didn't see me, too wrapped up in each other, in their private jokes and stolen moments. I watched them cross the lobby, saw him kiss her at the revolving doors. Not a passionate goodbye, but a casual, practiced gesture, the kind developed over time. The kind we used to share? Something cold and hard crystallized in my chest right then. Not heartbreak, I was already past that. This was something else. Something with edges sharp enough to cut. I followed them outside, maintaining distance, watched him hail her a cab, squeeze her hand one last time. I memorized her face as the taxi pulled away. Then I watched my fiancé straighten his tie, check his watch, and transform back into the man I thought I knew, all evidence of his other life neatly tucked away. He got into his car, our car, technically, since we'd bought it together, and drove off, undoubtedly heading home to me, to our apartment filled with wedding gifts and shared dreams. I didn't follow. Instead, I sat on a bench outside the hotel, suddenly aware of how cold the night had become, or maybe just aware of how cold I had become. My phone rang again. David, wondering where I was, concerned, playing the role of loving fiancé so convincingly I almost believed it myself. I let it ring. And as I stared at his name flashing on my screen, watching the call eventually go to voicemail, a plan began forming in my mind. The wedding was still happening, but not the wedding anyone expected. I didn't go home that night. Couldn't face the apartment where David and I had built our life together, every throw pillow and framed photo now a monument to my own stupidity. Instead, I checked into the very hotel where my fiancé had been having his affair. Poetic justice or just masochism? Hard to tell the difference when you're running on autopilot. Room 718 became my war room. I spent hours staring at the ceiling, my mind cycling through every moment of our relationship like I was watching our highlight reel being erased, frame by frame. 5 years reduced to ash in my mouth. The signs had been there, the late nights, the sudden password changes on his phone, how he'd sometimes look at me with this flash of guilt, pity. Whatever it was, I'd chosen not to see it. Stupid, trusting Danielle. Around 3 a.m., I finally answered one of David's calls. He was frantic, voice cracking with what sounded like genuine concern. I almost laughed at the performance. Oscar-worthy, really. Where was I? Was I okay? He'd been worried sick. I told him I needed space, pre-wedding jitters, staying with a friend to clear my head. He bought it completely, even sounded relieved. Probably thinking this solved his problem of how to juggle fiancé and mistress during these final wedding days. The ease with which he accepted my lie told me everything about how easily his own lies had come. When the call ended, I vomited everything I'd consumed in the past 12 hours. Scotch, martinis, and the bitter taste of betrayal. Not a recommended combination. Morning came with a hangover and crystal clarity. I had decisions to make. Confrontation? Cancellation? Public humiliation? The wedding industrial complex doesn't exactly include a chapter on what to do when your fiancé is cheating 3 days before the ceremony. I ordered room service coffee and made 2 lists. What I know and what I need. What I know. David has been cheating for at least 3 months. Alex knew and said nothing. $83K of mostly my father's money is non-refundable. 237 people are about to witness either a wedding or a nuclear meltdown. What I need? Dignity, justice, to not be the pathetic abandoned bride. That second list kept growing as the caffeine kicked in. I needed to not be the subject of pity at family gatherings for the next decade. Needed the truth to come out, but on my terms. Needed David to feel even a fraction of this gut-wrenching pain. And somewhere between my 3rd cup of coffee and the housekeeping knock, I realized something else I needed. To talk to her. Finding her wasn't difficult. David's browser history on our shared iPad, amateur move really, led me to her Instagram. Melissa Harper, interior designer, 32 years old, lover of oat milk lattes, coastal minimalism, and apparently, engaged men. Her most recent post was from 2 days ago, a close-up of a cappuccino with the caption, "Big changes coming. Some doors close so better ones can open." New chapter, Dar trust the process. The fucking audacity. I scrolled through months of her life. No explicit mentions of David, but plenty of self-care nights and work dinners that coincided perfectly with his client meetings. She had nearly 20,000 followers who commented endless heart emojis and "living your best life, girl," encouragements beneath carefully filtered photos of her seemingly perfect existence. It was while deep diving through her social media that I got the call from my mother. The florist needed final approval on something. The cake delivery time had changed. Dad wanted to know if we still needed the extra chairs for David's side. The mundane machinery of wedding planning continued to churn, oblivious to the fact that the bride was currently stalking her fiancé's mistress from a hotel room, wearing day-old clothes and plotting revenge. I answered my mother's questions mechanically while staring at a photo of Melissa at a rooftop bar, sun setting behind her, diamond tennis bracelet glinting on her wrist. A bracelet identical to the one David had given me for our 4th anniversary, claiming it was one of a kind. Nothing about us had been one of a kind, apparently. When my mother finally asked if I was okay, my voice must have betrayed something. I nearly broke, nearly told her everything. But the thought of her disappointment, the family drama, the humiliating cancellation calls. I couldn't do it. Not yet. Just wedding stress, Mom. Everything's fine. The second big lie of the day, and it wasn't even noon. My phone pinged with a text from Alex. "Are you okay? Can we talk?" Ah, yes, the guilty best man. I'd almost forgotten about his role in this little drama. Part of me wanted to ignore him completely. Loyal to David first, me second. But another part recognized that Alex might be useful. He had information, maybe even leverage. We met at a coffee shop far from our usual haunts. He looked terrible, unshaven, eyes bloodshot, shoulders hunched with the weight of his complicity. Good. He should feel like shit. The moment he saw me, words tumbled out of him like he'd been practicing them all night. How sorry he was. How he'd tried to convince David to come clean. How he'd been caught between loyalty to his oldest friend and doing what was right. I let him talk himself into exhaustion before I asked the only question that mattered. How long has it really been going on? Alex couldn't meet my eyes. Since before the engagement. The coffee shop swirled around me. Before the engagement? While I was planning our wedding, David had already been with her for over a year. Every moment of our supposed happiest time together had been a lie. Who else knows? My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. No one. I mean, maybe some guys from work? I don't know for sure. Is he in love with her? Alex flinched. I don't know, Danny. He doesn't talk about it like that. But he's still marrying me. He says he made a commitment to you. Your family has spent all this money. He doesn't want to hurt you. I actually laughed then, a sharp, ugly sound that made the barista glance over in concern. Doesn't want to hurt me. How fucking considerate. Alex reached across the table, but I pulled my hands away. What are you going to do? What was I going to do? Cancel everything and become the jilted bride, the cautionary tale, the recipient of pity casseroles for months. Let David off the hook with some mutual "we grew apart" statement while he rode off into the sunset with Melissa? Allow my father to lose his retirement money on a wedding that never happened? Or something shifted inside me then. A calm descended, the kind that comes with absolute certainty. I met Alex's worried gaze with a smile that made him sit back slightly. I'm going to get married on Saturday, I said, exactly as planned. Confusion crossed his face. You're forgiving him? No. I leaned forward, my voice low and steady. I'm going to make sure David remembers our wedding day for the rest of his life. Just not for the reasons he's expecting. I watched understanding dawn in Alex's eyes, followed quickly by alarm. Danny, whatever you're thinking, you owe me, Alex. I cut him off. You've been covering for him for months while watching me plan this wedding. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to help me, or I'm going to make sure everyone knows you were complicit. His face paled. What do you need me to do? That's when I laid out the first phase of my plan. Nothing too specific yet, just enough to secure his cooperation. I needed information only the best man would have access to. Needed his silence. Needed his loyalty to shift from David to me, just for the next 3 days. To his credit, Alex didn't hesitate long. Maybe it was guilt, or maybe he'd always known David didn't deserve me. Either way, by the time our coffee cups were empty, the best man had switched allegiances. As we left the coffee shop, my phone chimed with a text from David. Miss you. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Getting nervous yet? I showed it to Alex, who had the decency to look disgusted. You know what's funny? I said, pocketing my phone without responding. I'm not nervous at all anymore. For the first time since he proposed, I know exactly what I'm doing. And I did. The fog of shock and grief was burning off, replaced by a clarity so sharp it could cut glass. Or, more precisely, cut through the elaborate facade of the perfect wedding David thought he was still getting. Walking away from Alex, I felt the strangest sensation, like someone had replaced my shattered heart with something harder, something bulletproof. The old Danielle might have collapsed under the weight of this betrayal, might have begged for explanations or forgiveness. But that Danielle was gone. In her place stood someone new, someone with a wedding to plan, just not the one anyone was expecting. I returned to the hotel with a renewed sense of purpose. For the first time since discovering David's betrayal, I felt something other than pain. I felt power, the kind that comes from having nothing left to lose and everything to gain. My wedding was no longer a ceremony I was dreading, but a stage I was setting. First order of business, reconnaissance. I created a fake Instagram account, complete with inspirational quotes and sunset photos, and followed Melissa. She accepted within an hour. Her profile was now an open book, including her work schedule conveniently posted in her stories. Booked solid until Friday. Weekend off for self-care hard eyes. Self-care. Is that what the kids are calling home wrecking these days? According to her website, Melissa's design studio was in the Arts District, a 20-minute drive from my hotel. I showered, transformed myself with sunglasses and a hat I'd bought from the hotel gift shop, and headed there with no clear plan beyond needing to see her in person. Not in the grainy distance of the hotel lobby, but up close. I needed to understand what David had chosen over our life together. Her studio was exactly what you'd expect. All white walls, fiddle leaf figs, and overpriced woven baskets. Through the storefront window, I watched her charm a client, gesturing enthusiastically over fabric swatches. She laughed, tucking her perfectly highlighted hair behind her ear with a practiced move that somehow looked effortless. The diamond tennis bracelet, my diamond tennis bracelet, caught the light. I stood there for nearly 30 minutes, studying her like a scientist might examine a particularly interesting virus. Was she kinder than me? Funnier? Better in bed? What exactly had made David risk everything we'd built? The answer came when she hugged her client goodbye and checked her phone, her entire demeanor shifting. The professional smile disappeared, replaced by something softer, more genuine. She was texting someone, and I would bet my canceled honeymoon that it was David. Her fingers moved quickly across the screen, and I could almost feel the urgency, the excitement. She believed she was special to him, just like I had. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about her being better. This was about David being worse. Worse than I'd allowed myself to see. The kind of man who needed constant validation, who collected women like trophies, who would promise us both everything while planning to deliver nothing. I walked away before she could notice me, a plan crystallizing with each step. Melissa wasn't my enemy. She was my unwitting accomplice. And if I played this right, she would help me deliver the justice David so richly deserved. Back at the hotel, I made a list of assets. 1 wedding, fully paid and non-refundable, 237 guests, including David's entire family, professional network, and social circle, 1 best man with a guilty conscience, 1 mistress who clearly thought she was the only other woman, 1 father of the bride who taught me everything about poker faces and long cons, 1 maid of honor who once helped me steal our high school principal's car as revenge for sexist dress code enforcement. I had all the pieces. I just needed to arrange them properly. I texted my maid of honor, Rachel. Need to talk. Life or death. Not exaggerating. She called immediately. Rachel and I had been friends since we were 5. She knew my emergency voice, even in text form. I told her everything, from the text message to the hotel stakeout to my nascent plan. Unlike Alex, she didn't try to talk me out of anything. Instead, she said the 6 words that cemented her status as my ride or die. What do you need me to do? What followed was the most productive 48 hours of my life. While David thought I was having pre-wedding jitters at my parents' house, I was actually orchestrating his public downfall from room 718. Rachel arrived with reinforcements, my spare clothes, my laptop, and a bottle of tequila, for medicinal purposes only. We spread evidence across the hotel bed, screenshots of Melissa's Instagram, location history from David's accounts, text messages I'd managed to recover. Like detectives working a case, we established a timeline of his deception. The full picture was even worse than I'd imagined. David hadn't just been cheating with Melissa. Based on hotel charges and restaurant receipts I found while combing through our shared accounts, there had been at least 2 others in the past year alone. My fiancé wasn't just a cheater, he was a serial cheater who had gotten sloppy with his primary side piece. "Jesus, Danny," Rachel whispered, looking at the evidence. "He's a fucking sociopath." "No," I corrected her, strangely calm. "He's just a man who never thought he'd get caught, who assumed I was too in love, too invested, too afraid of embarrassment to ever call him out." I picked up our engagement photo, studied the confident smile on his face. He thought he had me trapped. I called Alex next, putting him on speaker so Rachel could witness his continued cooperation. "I need everything David has told you about the wedding," I instructed. "Every surprise he's planned, every detail he's handling, every secret he thinks I don't know about." Alex hesitated only briefly before spilling. David had arranged for a vintage car to take us from the ceremony to the reception. He'd hired a saxophone player for our first dance as a surprise. He'd written vows that he claimed would make me cry with happiness. Each detail was another twist of the knife, another piece of evidence that he'd been playing the devoted fiancé while living a double life. But they were also opportunities, points of vulnerability in his carefully constructed facade. "What about the bachelor party?" I asked. "Did anything happen that I should know about?" Alex's silence told me everything. "For fuck's sake," Rachel muttered. "It wasn't planned," Alex finally said, his voice small. "We were all drunk. This woman at the club was flirting with him and he didn't come back to the hotel until morning, 4 days before our wedding. While I was at my bridal shower, opening gifts and playing stupid games and thanking his mother for the crystal vase that was just perfect for our new home, I should have felt something: rage, betrayal, heartbreak. Instead, I felt oddly validated. This wasn't a momentary lapse or a one-time mistake. This was who David was, who he had always been, and who he would continue to be unless someone showed him there were consequences. "One more thing," I said to Alex. "I need you to meet with Melissa." "What? Why would I?" "Because you're going to tell her that David is having cold feet about the wedding, that he talks about her constantly, that you've never seen him this torn up about anyone." "Danny, I can't." "You can and you will," I cut him off, "unless you want me to tell David's mother about the bachelor party. You know, the one who's been sending me Bible verses about purity for the past year." Alex agreed to make contact the next day. With the best man secured, I moved on to the rest of my resources. I called my father, asking him to come to the hotel alone. When he arrived, confusion etched across his weathered face. I showed him everything. Dad had always been my hero, steady, principled, with a moral compass that never wavered. I expected him to counsel restraint or forgiveness. Instead, after reviewing my evidence in silence, he looked up with a gleam in his eye I hadn't seen since he taught me to play poker at age 12. "He hurt my little girl," he said simply. "So we're going to hurt him back." My father didn't ask about cancellation or refunds or what people would think. He asked what role he needed to play in my plan. In that moment, I realized where my newfound clarity came from. I was my father's daughter, through and through. Together, the 3 of us, Dad, Rachel, and I, refined my initial ideas into something elegant in its simplicity. We weren't just planning a wedding anymore. We were directing a play where only we knew the real script. Everyone else, David included, would be improvising. By Friday morning, the day before the wedding, each player was in position. Alex had met with Melissa, planting the seeds that David was conflicted about going through with the wedding because of his feelings for her. Rachel had quietly spoken with the wedding photographer, videographer, and DJ, ensuring they knew to capture every moment of what was about to unfold. Dad had a private conversation with the officiant, making a special request that would only make sense when the moment arrived. I had returned home, greeting David with a performance of pre-wedding excitement that deserved its own Academy Award. That night, at our rehearsal dinner, I watched David work the room with his practiced charm. He hugged my college roommates, laughed with my uncles, thanked his future in-laws for their generosity. His hand rested possessively on my lower back as he introduced me as the future Mrs. Jenkins to colleagues I'd never met. Each smile, each touch, each loving glance in my direction now read as what they truly were, the actions of a con man closing his biggest deal. "You look beautiful," he whispered in my ear as we posed for photos. I can't wait for tomorrow. I leaned into him, my lips against his cheek, and whispered back, "Neither can I." And I meant it. I really, really meant it. Morning of my wedding day. The date circled in gold on countless invitations, save the dates and vendor contracts. The day I'd imagined hundreds of times, waking up giddy, surrounded by bridesmaids, my mother crying as she helped with my veil, my father's proud face when he first saw me in my dress. Reality. I woke up alone in our apartment after David spent the night at his parents' house for tradition's sake. I stared at the ceiling, eerily calm, like a surgeon preparing for a complicated procedure. No jitters, no second thoughts, just the steady drumbeat of purpose. My phone erupted with notifications, congratulatory texts, last-minute well wishes, updates from the wedding planner. Among them, a message from Melissa. "Good luck today. I hope you get everything you deserve." The sheer audacity nearly made me laugh out loud. She thought she was being cleverly passive-aggressive, but she had no idea how right she was. I would indeed be getting everything I deserved today, just not in the way anyone expected. Rachel arrived with coffee and determination, followed by my other bridesmaids who bubbled with excitement I couldn't possibly share. My mother bustled in with the makeup artist and hairstylist, fussing over timeline details while I sat in calm surrender, allowing myself to be transformed into the beautiful bride everyone expected. "You're so calm," my mother remarked suspiciously as the makeup artist applied my mascara. "Are you on something?" "Just happy, Mom," I replied, and it wasn't entirely a lie. I was experiencing something adjacent to happiness, anticipation mixed with righteous purpose. As my bridesmaids chattered around me, I mentally rehearsed my role. Today, I needed to be two people, the beaming bride going through the expected motions, and the clear-eyed strategist executing a precision strike. One for the photos, one for me. The wedding coordinator popped in. Everything was on schedule, the flowers looked stunning, the weather was holding. David had arrived early with his groomsmen. "He seems so anxious to see you," she gushed. "I bet he is," I thought, wondering if his anxiety stemmed from excitement or fear that his house of cards might collapse before he could lock me into legal matrimony. The dress went on. Ivory lace over champagne silk, fitted through the bodice before flowing into a subtle train. Objectively beautiful. I'd cried during the final fitting 6 weeks ago. Now I regarded my reflection with clinical detachment, like I was suiting up for battle rather than romance. "Something's missing," my mother fretted, adjusting my necklace. Rachel caught my eye in the mirror. She alone knew that what was missing was the bride's belief in her groom. "She looks perfect," Rachel insisted, squeezing my shoulders. Our silent communication had always been our superpower. The photographer captured these manufactured moments, the bridesmaids zipping my dress, my mother fastening my grandmother's pearl earrings, my maid of honor handing me the bouquet. Evidence of normal wedding preparations that would stand in stark contrast to what was coming. "Your father's waiting," someone announced. Deep breath. Showtime. Dad stood outside the bridal suite, handsome in his tuxedo, his eyes suspiciously bright when he saw me. For a millisecond, doubt flickered. Could I really go through with this? Embarrass myself? Shock our guests? Create a scene that would be gossiped about for years? Then Dad hugged me and whispered, "Remember what I taught you about poker. Never show your cards until you're ready to take the pot." My doubt vanished. Arm in arm with my father, I walked toward the ceremony space, a garden overlooking the lake, white chairs arranged in neat rows, rose petals scattered along the aisle. Beautiful. Perfect. Exactly as I'd planned during those months of blissful ignorance. The string quartet began playing. Guests stood. And at the end of the aisle, David waited, looking exactly like the man I'd thought I was marrying. Handsome, composed, seemingly devoted. Beside him stood Alex, his face a mask of forced happiness that wouldn't have fooled anyone looking closely enough. As Dad and I processed slowly down the aisle, I surveyed the audience. David's parents beaming with pride at their only son, my extended family dabbing at tears, college friends, work colleagues, distant relatives who'd traveled across country, 237 people who had no idea they were about to witness not a union, but an unmasking. And in the back row on my side, barely noticeable unless you knew to look, sat the wedding planner's assistant, who was actually Melissa's roommate, recruited by Rachel through a friend of a friend. Our insurance policy, our eyes and ears, our direct line to the mistress who was waiting by her phone for updates. That had been Rachel's master stroke. "If we're doing this," she'd said, "let's make sure everyone who needs to see it, sees it." The roommate would be our live broadcaster, ensuring Melissa received real-time updates about the ceremony she believed would be called off at any moment. I reached the altar. Dad kissed my cheek, placed my hand in David's, and stepped back, but not before giving my fingers a subtle squeeze. The signal. He'd done his part. David's hand felt warm against mine, familiar yet suddenly foreign. He smiled down at me, his eyes crinkling at the corners the way they always did, the way I'd once found so endearing. "You look incredible," he murmured for my ears only. I smiled back, letting him see exactly what he expected: adoration, excitement, love. The perfect bride to match his perfect groom performance. He relaxed slightly, relief evident in his shoulders. Whatever pre-wedding jitters had concerned him, he clearly believed we were back on solid ground. The officiant welcomed everyone, spoke about love and commitment, honesty and trust, each word landing like an ironic dagger between my ribs. I stood still, nodding at appropriate moments, playing my part flawlessly while my mind raced ahead to the carefully orchestrated moments to come. Behind us, I knew Alex was sweating through his expensive suit. Beside me, Rachel held my bouquet, her knuckles white with tension. And scattered throughout the venue were the unwitting players in our drama, the DJ with his special instructions, the photographer briefed to capture specific reactions, the videographer positioned for optimal coverage. The officiant smiled benevolently. "Before we proceed with the vows, the bride has requested a special moment of personal reflection." This wasn't on the program. David's eyebrows lifted slightly, our first deviation from the script. But he maintained his smile, ever the flexible performer, probably assuming this was some sentimental addition I'd arranged as a surprise. In a way, he was right. I turned to face our guests, our friends, our families, David's hand still in mine. A collective murmur of confusion rippled through the audience at this unexpected change in ceremony flow. "Thank you all for being here today," I began, my voice surprisingly steady. "Before we continue, there's something I need to share with everyone. Especially you, David." The first card was about to hit the table. I felt a strange calm wash over me as I faced our guests. 237 faces stared back, expressions ranging from confused to concerned to mildly entertained. David's hand tightened around mine, a warning squeeze that I ignored. "When I was little, my dad taught me that marriage is built on honesty," I continued, my voice carrying across the suddenly silent garden. "He said without truth, there's no foundation." I glanced at my father, who gave me an almost imperceptible nod. David shifted beside me, his practiced smile starting to falter. "Honey, what are you doing?" he whispered, still trying to maintain his composure. "We can talk about whatever this is later." I turned to him, feeling oddly detached, like I was watching this scene unfold from somewhere above us. "That's the problem, David. We're all out of laters." Turning back to our audience, I took a deep breath. "I've always believed in transparency, so I want to be transparent with all of you. 3 days ago, I discovered that David has been cheating on me." The words hung in the air for a moment before a collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Not once, not twice, repeatedly. Throughout our engagement, David's mother made a choked sound from the front row. His father's face hardened into stone. My side of the aisle was a mixture of horror and dawning satisfaction. Apparently I wasn't the only one who'd had suspicions. "Danielle, stop this!" David hissed, dropping my hand and grabbing my elbow instead. "You're embarrassing yourself." I laughed, actually laughed, and the sound echoed unnaturally in the tense silence. "That's where you're wrong. For the first time in our relationship, I'm not the one who should be embarrassed." I nodded to Rachel, who pulled her phone from a hidden pocket in her bridesmaid dress. She tapped the screen, and suddenly the photo of David and Melissa kissing outside the Westlake Hotel projected onto the white backdrop we'd installed for the romantic slideshow portion of the ceremony. Another gasp from the crowd. David's face drained of color. "That's from last Thursday," I explained conversationally, as if discussing the weather. While I was finalizing our seating chart, David was finalizing plans with Melissa. "Oh, and this one." Rachel swiped to the next photo, showing David entering the hotel, timestamp clearly visible. "That's from 3 months ago. One of many Thursday client meetings." "Turn that off," David demanded, voice cracking. His eyes darted around wildly like a cornered animal searching for escape. "David Jenkins, always so concerned about appearances," I said, my tone almost gentle. "So worried about what people might think. That's why you couldn't just end our engagement when you fell for someone else, right? Too messy? Too public? Too expensive?" I stepped away from him, addressing our stunned audience directly. "Speaking of expensive, Dad, how much was this wedding again?" My father stood slowly from his seat in the front row. $83,000, Princess." Whispers erupted through the crowd. David's mother covered her face with her hands. $83,000 of my parents' retirement fund, I clarified, for a marriage that was doomed before it began. Because David here, I gestured toward him as he stood frozen beside the officiant, didn't have the decency or courage to be honest. Alex shifted uncomfortably behind David, his role as best man suddenly the most awkward position in the wedding party. "Alex knew," I continued, nodding toward him. "Caught David with another woman months ago. Kept his secret because that's what bros do, right? Protect each other's lies?" Alex looked like he might throw up. David finally found his voice. "This is insane. You're twisting everything. I made a mistake, one mistake, and I was going to tell you after we were legally bound." I cut him off. "After my dad's money was spent? After I was trapped?" I turned back to Rachel, who swiped to the next image. Screenshots of hotel receipts spanning months, all highlighted and annotated. Someone in the back rows let out a low whistle. A few guests began to stand, uncertain whether to leave or stay for the unfolding drama. "I could have canceled," I said, addressing the confused faces before me. "Could have called each of you, explained the situation, suffered through your pity and concern. But then I realized, why should I be the one making apologetic phone calls? Why should my parents lose their deposit? Why should I miss out on a day I've been planning for 8 months? I turned back to David, who was visibly sweating now. "So I decided to get married today after all. Just not to you." Confusion rippled through the crowd again. David blinked rapidly, processing my words. "What are you talking about?" he finally managed. That's when the back doors of the venue opened, and all heads turned to see Alex's brother Michael walking in. Michael, who'd flown in specifically for this moment. Michael, who'd always made his disapproval of David clear. Michael, who'd comforted me after I discovered the truth. "The thing about weddings," I continued as Michael made his way down the aisle, "is that once you've paid for everything, you might as well use it." David's eyes widened as understanding dawned. "You can't be serious." "Oh, but I am," I replied, stepping further away from him. "You see, while you were busy leading your double life, I was falling out of love with the man I thought you were. And in the process, I realized something important. I deserve better. Someone honest. Someone who values me. Someone who wouldn't humiliate me while planning to stand at this altar and lie through their teeth." Michael reached the front and took his place beside me. The officiant, who'd been briefed on the change of plans, looked uncomfortable but determined. "So, David," I said, "you're no longer needed here, though you're welcome to stay and watch what a genuine commitment looks like." I looked at his parents. "Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins, I'm truly sorry for the embarrassment. I hope you'll direct your disappointment where it belongs, at your son, not at me." David stood frozen for several seconds before Alex finally stepped forward, whispering something in his ear. The two of them backed away awkwardly as gasps and murmurs continued to ripple through the crowd. As David retreated, still seemingly in shock, I caught a glimpse of a woman slipping out the back. Melissa's roommate, no doubt rushing to report this unexpected turn of events. I turned to face Michael, taking his hands in mine. Behind us, David finally broke into a run, disappearing down the garden path with Alex hurrying after him. "Now," I said, looking into Michael's eyes with the first genuine smile I'd felt in days, "I believe we were about to start a wedding?" The look on people's faces was something I'll treasure until my dying day. Shock mingling with dawning admiration, horror transforming into barely suppressed delight at witnessing such gloriously unexpected drama. Wedding crashers pay good money for this level of entertainment, and here I'd provided it free of charge. My mother recovered first, standing up with the regal composure that's gotten her through 4 decades of teaching high school chemistry. "Well," she announced to the confused masses, "I believe we still have a beautiful venue, excellent catering, and an open bar waiting. Shall we proceed?" God bless that woman. Always practical, even in chaos. The officiant, poor man looked like he'd aged 10 years in the past 5 minutes, cleared his throat and shuffled his notes. Dad had briefed him on this possibility, but reality was clearly exceeding expectations. "Dearly beloved," he began tentatively, "we are gathered here today. I'll be honest, the actual ceremony that followed is mostly a blur." Michael squeezed my hands, his eyes containing equal parts admiration and concern. We'd discussed this thoroughly the night before, a symbolic ceremony, legally meaningless but emotionally priceless, a statement rather than a marriage. "You don't have to do this part," he'd told me when I laid out the full plan. "The public revelation is enough," but it wasn't. Not for me. David needed to lose everything he thought he was getting, including the bride. He needed to know I had options, that I wasn't devastated, that I could replace him before the cake frosting had time to set. So Michael and I exchanged vows, simple, honest words about respect and friendship, no promises of forever, just commitments to truth and dignity. The crowd gradually settled into a sort of dazed participation, uncertain but increasingly invested in this unexpected redemption story unfolding before them. Rachel beamed beside me, proudly holding my bouquet like it was a trophy we'd won together. My father watched with unmistakable pride, his arm around my mother, who had progressed from shocked to tearful to something approximating acceptance in record time. When the officiant pronounced us partners in this moment of truth, Michael kissed me chastely on the cheek, and the crowd actually applauded, tentatively at first, then with growing enthusiasm until it became a roaring standing ovation. Talk about validation. As we turned to face our audience, I spotted David's parents still in the front row, his mother crying silently while his father stared straight ahead with military rigidity. I felt a momentary pang. They weren't responsible for their son's choices. But then Mr. Jenkins stood, straightened his tie, and gave me a solemn nod before leading his wife away. Message received, no hard feelings. The reception that followed was surreal, like attending an alternate universe version of my own wedding. The same flowers, same band, same signature cocktails, but with an electric current of scandal running beneath every interaction. People either couldn't look me in the eye or couldn't look away. "That was the most badass thing I've ever seen," my college roommate whispered, hugging me too tightly. "I can't believe you actually..." She gestured wordlessly, apparently unable to articulate the magnitude of what had transpired. "Hell hath no fury," I replied with a shrug that felt almost genuine. The wedding planner, bless her adaptable soul, had quickly rearranged the seating chart, combining the Jenkins family tables with others to hide their absence. The DJ, after a brief moment of panic, embraced the chaos, announcing the friendship celebration of Danielle and Michael, with only the slightest quaver in his voice. Where was David during all this? According to the texts flooding Rachel's phone from our various informants, he'd fled to his apartment, ignored Alex's attempts to talk him down, and was frantically calling Melissa, who wasn't answering. Because Melissa, it seemed, was having her own meltdown. "She got the whole play-by-play from her roommate," Rachel reported gleefully, showing me her phone mid-reception. "Apparently she's furious, not just at David for being publicly exposed, but at Alex for making her believe David was going to call off the wedding for her. She thought she was special. The only one. Rookie mistake," I said, taking a celebratory sip of champagne. "The best part?" She posted on Instagram. Rachel pulled up the app, showing me Melissa's latest update, a black screen with white text. "When you realize you've been the side piece, not the main character. Trust your instincts, not his promises." Lesson learned. I actually felt a twinge of solidarity with her. We'd both been deceived by the same man. The difference was only one of us had gotten revenge. As the reception continued around me, guests dancing with increasing abandon as the alcohol flowed and the story spread, I found myself at the edge of the dance floor, watching this bizarre celebration of my non-wedding. Michael was dancing with my grandmother, who'd taken to him immediately despite the unusual circumstances. Rachel was surrounded by bridesmaids, no doubt recounting her role in our scheme. My parents were speaking earnestly with distant relatives, damage control wrapped in dignified explanation. And I felt, what exactly? Not happiness. The wound was too fresh for that. Not regret. David had earned every moment of this public reckoning. What I felt was something more complex, a cocktail of vindication, relief, and an unexpected sense of liberation. "You doing okay?" Michael appeared at my side, slightly flushed from dancing with my surprisingly spry grandmother. "I'm surprisingly good," I admitted, though I keep waiting for the emotional crash. "It'll come," he said, handing me a fresh glass of champagne. "But when it does, you'll handle it. That's what's impressive about you, Danny. Not the revenge, but the strength." I studied him, Alex's quieter, more thoughtful brother. The man who'd agreed to participate in this charade, not out of romantic interest, but out of friendship and a straightforward sense of justice. For the first time, I wondered if I'd overlooked something important by always seeing him as just Alex's brother. "Thank you," I said simply. "For all of this, for showing up when I needed someone to stand beside me." "Easiest decision I've ever made," he replied with a half smile. "Though I'm pretty sure this makes me your fake husband now, which might complicate my dating life for a while." I laughed, a real laugh that surprised me with its authenticity. The party continued into the night, morphing from wedding reception to something more akin to a celebration of liberation. My carefully planned first dance became an impromptu group performance to "I Will Survive." The father-daughter dance transformed into Dad spinning me around while guests cheered each twirl like it was an act of defiance. The cake cutting. Well, Michael and I smashed slices into each other's faces with far more enthusiasm than we'd planned, resulting in a photo that would later go viral when someone inevitably posted it online. As midnight approached and guests began to depart, each exit accompanied by fierce hugs and whispered affirmations of my bravery, my phone buzzed with a text. David, finally finding his courage through the digital remove of a screen. "You've made your point. Humiliated me in front of everyone we know. I hope you're satisfied. We could have handled this privately like adults." The audacity was almost impressive. I showed it to Rachel, who snorted loudly. "Privately?" she read incredulously. "Like how he privately screwed around behind your back for a year? The entitlement of this man." I stared at my phone, considering various scathing responses before settling on simple truth. "I am satisfied. And yes, we could have handled this privately, if you'd made a different choice a year ago. Goodbye, David." I blocked his number before he could reply. Some conversations aren't worth continuing. The last guest departed around 1 in the morning, leaving just my core support team, my parents, Rachel, and Michael, sitting around a table littered with centerpieces and half-empty champagne bottles. Mom had kicked off her heels, Dad had loosened his tie, and Rachel was methodically eating leftover cake straight from the serving platter. "Well," Dad said, raising his glass, "that wasn't the wedding day I imagined for my daughter, but I've never been prouder." "To Danielle," Michael added, lifting his own glass, "who taught us all a valuable lesson about consequences." "To all of us," I corrected, including everyone in my toast. The best revenge squad a girl could ask for. We clinked glasses, the sound crystal clear in the emptying venue. Tomorrow would bring complications, social media fallout, returned gifts, explanations to more distant connections. But in that moment, surrounded by the people who had helped me transform humiliation into empowerment, I felt something unexpected settling into my bones. Peace. Not the peaceful future I'd once imagined with David, but something stronger. Peace with myself and my own capacity for resilience. Peace with the knowledge that sometimes the happy ending isn't the one you planned, but the one you claim for yourself from the wreckage of someone else's lies. I may not have gotten married for real that day, but I'd reclaimed something far more valuable than a husband, my own damn dignity. And that, unlike David's promises, was something no one could ever take away from me. 6 months after executing the most spectacular wedding revenge in recorded history, at least according to my cousin's TikTok, which hit 2 million views, I'm sitting in a coffee shop watching a woman across from me cry into her latte. She found my DMs through the #revenge bride scandal hashtag that briefly made me internet famous. "He's been cheating our entire relationship," she hiccups. "The wedding is in 3 weeks. This happens more often than you'd think. I've become something of an unwilling guru for betrayed fiancés, part therapist, part revenge consultant, part cautionary tale. The woman across from me isn't looking for permission to do what I did. She just wants to know that blowing up her life won't actually kill her. Cancel the wedding, I tell her gently. Not because of him, but because of you. You deserve to walk towards someone who isn't walking away from you at the same time. She nods, tears sliding down her cheeks. Was it worth it? The public spectacle? Do you regret any of it? Do I regret it? That's the $1 million question, isn't it? The aftermath was exactly as chaotic as you'd expect. David's side of the story hit social media within hours. I was crazy, vindictive, had misunderstood innocent friendships, had orchestrated a cruel public humiliation because of my own insecurities. Some people believed him. His mother certainly did, sending me a 3-page handwritten letter detailing my moral failings and psychological deficiencies. But evidence speaks louder than defensiveness. When Melissa went public with her side, complete with screenshots, date-stamped photos, and devastating details about promises David had made her, his carefully constructed narrative collapsed like the house of cards it was. The most satisfying moment came 2 weeks after the non-wedding, when David's other mistress, surprise, there was another one, reached out to me directly. Turned out our mutual ex had a type, professional women with their own money who wouldn't ask too many questions about his weeknight whereabouts. We met for drinks, compared notes, and ended up becoming unlikely friends. Nothing bonds people quite like mutual betrayal. As for David himself, last I heard, he'd relocated to Chicago, apparently being known as that guy from the revenge wedding video made dating in our city challenging. His company quietly moved him to another branch after 3 clients mentioned the scandal during meetings. He tried dating Melissa briefly, but according to mutual connections, that imploded spectacularly when she found texts from yet another woman on his phone. Some leopards really can't change their spots, or keep their pants zipped. The financial fallout was less entertaining. My parents insisted the money was well spent on the most memorable lesson of my adult life, but I couldn't let them shoulder that burden alone. I've been making monthly deposits into their retirement account, smaller than I'd like, but consistent. Wedding gifts were returned with handwritten notes explaining the situation. Most people were understanding, some weren't. Life goes on. So, the crying woman across from me prompts again. Was it worth it? The public part? Maybe not entirely, I admit. But standing up for myself? Refusing to be the sad, discarded fiancé? Absolutely worth it, she nods, gathering strength from somewhere inside herself. I recognize that moment, the shift from victim to protagonist in your own story. It's beautiful to witness. After she leaves, I sit alone with my thoughts and my cooling coffee. The truth is more complicated than what I told her. The weeks following my revenge were harder than I let on. Once the adrenaline faded and the supportive crowds dispersed, I was still left with the wreckage of what I'd believed was my future. The emptied apartment, the honeymoon refunds, the midnight doubts about whether I'd ever trust anyone again. Rachel moved in temporarily to keep me from spiraling. We stayed up late watching terrible movies and emptying wine bottles, her steady presence a reminder that some relationships never betray you. My mother called daily with transparent excuses to check on me. Dad sent funny newspaper clippings like he'd done since I was in college. Their unwavering support was both comforting and occasionally suffocating. I was determined not to become their eternal project, the daughter who never recovered from public heartbreak. And Michael? That's the plot twist I didn't see coming. We didn't dramatically fall in love after our fake ceremony. That would be too neat, too Hollywood. Instead, we developed something I'd never really had with David, an authentic friendship built on mutual respect. We met for coffee occasionally, then regularly. He helped me move into my new apartment. I helped him navigate a work crisis. No pressure, no expectations, just 2 people who had shared something extraordinary slowly discovering they enjoyed each other's ordinary company too. 4 months after the non-wedding, he kissed me during a movie night at my place. It wasn't passionate or desperate, just a quiet question mark at the end of a sentence we'd been composing together without realizing it. Too weird? He'd asked, pulling back slightly. Definitely weird, I'd answered honestly, but maybe the good kind of weird. We've been carefully, cautiously dating since then, taking it glacially slow, both hyper-aware of the unusual foundation we're building on. He jokes that most couples have to worry about meeting the parents, while he had to worry about being ceremonially fake married in front of mine before our first date. I'm not naive enough to believe this is necessarily my happily ever after. Life has thoroughly cured me of such certainties. But there's something compelling about building a relationship with someone who has already seen you at your most vulnerable and your most powerful in the same day. My phone buzzes with a text from Michael. Still on for dinner tonight? Mom's asking if you're coming to Dad's birthday next weekend. Another unexpected development? His parents adore me. Apparently, watching a woman publicly eviscerate a cheater instead of quietly accepting humiliation made quite the impression on his feminist mother. Who knew? I respond with a quick affirmative, then gather my things to leave the coffee shop. As I step outside, I spot a familiar face across the street. Alex, David's former best man, walking hand in hand with someone I don't recognize. He sees me too, freezes momentarily, then offers an awkward wave. I wave back, surprising myself. The white-hot anger I once felt toward him has faded to something milder, disappointment tinged with pity. He was caught in David's web too, in his own way. We're all collateral damage in someone else's story sometimes. That's the thing about revenge. It doesn't unlock some magical door to instant healing. It doesn't erase the pain or the time wasted. What it gave me wasn't happiness, but something perhaps more valuable, the unshakable knowledge that I would never again compromise my self-respect for someone else's convenience, that I had the strength to burn everything down and still emerge from the ashes. As I walk to my car, I mentally compose a text to the crying woman from the coffee shop, something I wish someone had told me during those dark days after discovering David's betrayal. The worst part isn't losing the future you planned. It's realizing that future never actually existed. But there's freedom in that too. Freedom to build something real instead of something that only looked good in photographs. My phone buzzes again. Michael sending a follow-up text with a restaurant suggestion and a terrible pun that makes me smile despite myself. I type back an equally terrible pun because that's apparently our love language now. Is this new relationship better because of what I went through? I don't know. But I'm better, stronger, more authentic. Less willing to accept beautiful lies over uncomfortable truths. I didn't marry the best man in the conventional sense that day in the garden, but in taking control of my narrative, in refusing to be the victim in David's story, I chose the best path for the woman I was becoming. And really, isn't that the most satisfying revenge of all? 1 year to the day after my non-wedding, I'm back at the venue. Not for some twisted anniversary celebration or to exorcise lingering demons. The place has actually been converted into a co-working space, and I'm here for a meeting. Life's funny like that. The garden where I publicly dismantled my ex-fiancé is now dotted with hipsters on MacBooks and entrepreneurs taking conference calls beside the koi pond. I wonder if any of them know they're working on hallowed ground, the site of what my college roommate still calls the wedding massacre of 2023. This feels weird, right? Michael says, appearing beside me with 2 coffees. Being back here? Weirdly not weird, I admit, taking the cup from him. Like visiting the site of an accident years later and realizing it's just an ordinary street corner. Michael and I are still together, still taking things at our own pace, still discovering new layers to whatever this relationship is. We survived the awkward, "how did you two meet?" questions at parties, weathered the inevitable comparisons to my relationship with David, created something authentic from circumstances that were anything but. My phone buzzes, Rachel sending our finalized presentation deck for this afternoon's pitch. After my unintentional viral moment, we leverage the attention into something productive, a consulting firm specializing in crisis management and strategic communications. Turns out publicly handling your own personal disaster makes for a compelling professional origin story. Ready for this? Michael asks as we head toward the conference room, formerly the bridal suite where I'd prepared to marry a different man. Born ready, I reply, channeling confidence I mostly feel. The Thompson account is practically ours. That's another unexpected development. Michael eventually left his corporate job to join our growing firm. His analytical skills complement Rachel's creativity and my newfound expertise in navigating public scrutiny. We make a surprisingly effective team. Life after revenge is nothing like I imagined during those frantic days of planning my wedding takedown. I'd anticipated some kind of grand catharsis followed by clean closure, credits rolling as I walked triumphantly into the sunset, narrative neatly resolved. The reality was messier, more complicated, more human. For months after, I received messages from strangers, some supportive, others judgmental, many sharing their own stories of betrayal and resilience. I became an unwitting symbol for something larger than my personal drama. The woman who refused to be publicly humiliated by accepting private humiliation. David eventually stopped trying to contact me, though I hear things through the inevitable grapevine of mutual connections. He's dating someone new, telling a carefully edited version of our story that casts him as the victim of my emotional instability. She believes him. I give it 6 months before she's sitting across from me in a coffee shop, asking if my public revenge was worth it. His parents still avoid mine at community functions. Some friendships collapsed under the weight of divided loyalties. Certain relatives still make pointed comments about forgiveness at family gatherings. Life doesn't tie itself up with tidy bows just because you've delivered the perfect parting shot. But I wouldn't change a thing. Well, maybe one thing. I'd have charged admission to the ceremony. Could have at least recouped some of Dad's retirement money. As Michael and I reach the conference room, I spot something I hadn't noticed on arrival, a small decorative fountain in the corner. The same fountain that had provided ambient background music during my vows. They've kept it as a water feature in the redesign. I pause, momentarily transported back to that day, standing before our assembled guests, adrenaline coursing through my veins, Melissa's roommate slipping out to report the unfolding drama, David's face as he realized what was happening. The absolute clarity I felt in that moment, perhaps the most honest moment of our entire relationship. "Earth to Danielle," Michael says gently, touching my arm. "Where'd you go just now?" "Just remembering," I reply, shaking off the ghosts. "It's been exactly 1 year." He checks his watch, eyes widening slightly. "To the hour." Wow. Poetic, right? Pitching my biggest client in the same room where I became an accidental internet sensation. Michael smiles, the kind that reaches his eyes in a way David's never quite did. "You want to know the difference between you then and you now? Besides the fact that I've sworn off strapless dresses forever? You're not playing defense anymore," he says simply. "You're not reacting to someone else's betrayal or trying to reclaim something that was taken. You're building something new, something that was never about him. And damn if he isn't right." The woman who orchestrated that wedding revenge was fighting to reclaim her narrative from someone who tried to make her a footnote in his story. The woman I am now is writing an entirely different story, one where that day was just a particularly dramatic chapter, not the defining moment of my life. Our potential client arrives, a company facing its own PR crisis, hoping our firm can help them navigate the choppy waters of public perception. As we settle into the presentation, I catch myself unconsciously touching the spot where my engagement ring used to sit. Some scars fade but never disappear completely. They just become part of your landscape, landmarks on the map of your life. The great betrayal of 2023. The wedding that wasn't. The day I chose myself over the comfortable lie of someone else's version of love. After the meeting, nailed it by the way, contract all but signed, Michael and I linger in what used to be the venue's garden. The string lights are still there, now providing ambient illumination for afternoon tea service instead of first dances. "Hey," he says suddenly, "I've been meaning to ask you something." For one wild second, I think he's about to propose, and my heart does this complicated gymnastic routine in my chest, part panic, part something that feels surprisingly like anticipation. But instead, he pulls out his phone, showing me an email. "My company's annual charity gala is next month. Would be a good networking opportunity for the firm. Plus," he hesitates, looking uncharacteristically nervous, "it would be our first official public event. Together." I stare at him, this man who stood beside me on the worst day of my life and has somehow become central to some of my best days since. The brother of the best friend who betrayed me. The unexpected plot twist in my revenge story. Not my fake husband anymore, but something much more real. "Are you asking me to be your +1, Michael Jenkins?" I tease, though we both know it's more significant than that. "I'm asking if you're ready," he clarifies, "to step fully into whatever this is. To let people see us as an actual couple, not just business partners with a weird backstory. Am I ready? That's the question, isn't it? Not just about a charity gala or our evolving relationship, but about finally, completely leaving the past where it belongs. I think about David, Melissa, the wedding that imploded, the viral fame that followed. All of it seems increasingly distant, like watching scenes from someone else's life. You know what? I am ready, I say, surprised by the certainty in my voice. But fair warning, people will talk. Michael grins. Let them. Best revenge is living well, right? I laugh and take his hand as we walk out of the garden, away from the ghost of the bride I almost was, and toward something I never could have planned, but somehow fits better than that custom-altered wedding dress ever did. The woman who stood in this garden a year ago was seeking justice through spectacular revenge. The woman walking out of it today has discovered something far more satisfying, a life that's no longer defined by what was done to her, but by what she's chosen to build from the wreckage. And honestly, that's a much better story. 2 years. That's how long it's been since I stood in a garden and chose spectacular revenge over quiet dignity. 2 years since I swapped a cheating fiancé for self-respect and an unexpected plot twist named Michael. They say time gives you perspective, smooths the rough edges of painful memories, turns raw wounds into faded scars with good stories attached. I guess that's mostly true. People still occasionally recognize me. "Aren't you the revenge bride?" They'll ask in coffee shops or fitting rooms, their eyes lighting with the thrill of encountering minor internet fame in the wild. I've developed a standard response. Former revenge bride, current crisis management consultant. Need help burning anything down professionally? Usually gets a laugh. Sometimes gets a client. Our firm, Controlled Burn Communications, has expanded to 7 full-time employees. Turns out there's a significant market for people who know how to navigate public meltdowns with strategic precision. Rachel handles the creative side. Michael manages operations. I'm the face, the living testimonial that even the most spectacular disaster can become a foundation for something better. David still lives in Chicago. Engaged again, according to mutual friends who think I want to know these things. I don't, not really, but information has a way of finding you regardless. His fiancée follows our company Instagram account from a private profile she thinks I haven't noticed. I wonder if she's doing reconnaissance or seeking reassurance. Maybe both. I hope he's changed. Not for his sake, but for hers. Some lessons shouldn't need to be taught twice. Melissa found me at a conference last year, approached me at the bar with 2 martinis and a hesitant smile. "I owe you a drink," she said, "and probably an apology." We talked for 3 hours, compared notes, laughed about things that wouldn't have seemed remotely funny 2 years earlier. Turns out she's brilliant and funny when she's not sleeping with someone else's fiancé. We're not friends exactly, but we follow each other's careers with respectful distance. She sent a referral our way last quarter. I sent one back. Grudges are exhausting to maintain. As for Michael and me, well, that's the question people really want answered, isn't it? Did the fake husband become the real thing? Did revenge transform magically into romance? Yes and no. And then yes again. We moved in together last spring. No grand proposal, no viral announcement, just the practical merging of 2 lives that had been gradually entwining anyway. My apartment lease ended. His place had better natural light and closer proximity to our favorite Thai restaurant. Logic met emotion somewhere in the middle, and suddenly we were arguing about closet space and which couch to keep. 6 months later, on a random Tuesday night while loading the dishwasher, he looked up and said, "We should probably get married for real at some point, right?" I threw a dish towel at him. "That's your proposal? While I'm scraping pad thai remnants into the garbage disposal? You've already had the big production," he pointed out. "Thought you might appreciate something low-key this time around." He wasn't wrong. We got married at the courthouse 3 weeks later. Just our immediate families, Rachel, and a photographer friend who promised to capture authentic moments without Pinterest perfection. I wore a simple white jumpsuit. Michael wore the same suit from our fake ceremony, which we decided was either creepy or poetic. Maybe both. Dad walked me down a hallway instead of an aisle. Mom cried, but less dramatically than the first time. When the judge pronounced us husband and wife, Michael whispered, "Second time's the charm," and I laughed so hard they had to pause for our first kiss. The reception was dinner at our favorite restaurant, where the chef, a client who'd weathered his own public scandal with our help, treated us to a custom menu and enough champagne to float a small yacht. No first dance, no cake cutting, no bouquet toss. Just good food and better company and the conspicuous absence of viral potential. Rachel gave the only toast, raising her glass with theatrical gravity. To Michael and Danielle, proof that sometimes the understudy steals the show. Life isn't perfect now. We have ordinary arguments about work boundaries and holiday schedules. I still occasionally wake from dreams where I'm standing at that altar, except in the nightmares. My revenge plan fails. David marries me anyway, and I'm trapped in a life built on lies. Those mornings, I reach for Michael with a gratitude that borders on desperate. He understands without explanation. That's the thing about beginning your relationship at someone else's ending. You appreciate the fragility of what you're building. Take less for granted. Work harder at honesty, even when it's uncomfortable. Last month, completely by accident, I ran into David's mother at a charity function. I saw her first, enough time to consider a strategic retreat to the ladies' room. But something made me stay put, meet her eyes across the silent auction tables. She approached with the careful dignity that had always been her hallmark. No warmth, but no open hostility either. "Danielle," she said with a small nod, "you look well." "So do you, Mrs. Jenkins." The awkward pause that followed contained 2 years of unspoken recriminations and defenses. What do you say to the woman whose son you publicly eviscerated? What does she say to the woman who had every reason to do so? Finally, she surprised me. "I want you to know," she said carefully, "that while I cannot condone the manner of your revelation, I understand why you felt it necessary." A pause. "David has made choices that disappointed many people who loved him." It wasn't quite an apology, wasn't quite absolution either. But it was something, an acknowledgement that sometimes the dramatic gesture isn't motivated by drama, but by desperation, by the need to be seen and heard when someone has worked very hard to make you invisible. "Thank you," I said simply. "That means more than you might think." She nodded once, then changed the subject to my business, which she'd apparently been following from afar. We spoke for 10 polite minutes before parting ways. Not friends, not enemies, just 2 women who had survived the same storm from different ships. As she walked away, I felt something heavy and jagged finally dislodge from my chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but release. The last stubborn fragment of anger I'd been carrying without realizing it. Sometimes I wonder how life would have unfolded if I'd never seen that text. If David had been more careful, if I'd been less observant, if we'd actually gotten married as planned, would I have eventually discovered his betrayal? Or would I have lived for years in blissful ignorance, raising children with a man leading a double life? The thought makes me shudder. There's an old saying, "Living well is the best revenge." It's a nice sentiment, very Michelle Obama. When they go low, we go high. But I think it's incomplete. Sometimes before you can live well, you need to clear the ground. Burn away what's toxic to make room for something healthier to grow. My revenge wasn't just about humiliating David. It was about refusing to be humiliated myself. Refusing to quietly absorb the consequences of someone else's betrayal. It was a forest fire. Destructive, yes, but ultimately regenerative. The landscape of my life today, my thriving business, my unconventional marriage, my hard-won wisdom about trust and integrity, all of it grew from the ashes of that spectacular, controversial choice. Would I recommend my path to every wronged fiancé who finds herself in similar circumstances? Probably not. Public revenge isn't for the faint of heart. It has consequences, collateral damage, complicated aftermath. But would I do it again? In a heartbeat. Because here's what I've learned. There are moments in life that define you, not just by what happens to you, but by how you choose to respond. In that garden 2 years ago, facing the man who thought I would quietly accept whatever scraps of honesty and respect he deigned to offer, I chose to rewrite the ending. Not as the sympathetic abandoned bride, not as the woman scorned, but as the protagonist who seized control of her own story and redirected it toward something truer. Michael comes up behind me as I'm writing this, wraps his arms around my shoulders. "Still working on your memoir?" he teases, knowing I've been trying to decide whether to tell our full story in book form. "Just thinking," I say, leaning back against him, "about how differently things could have gone." "Regrets?" he asks, and I hear the slight insecurity beneath the question. Even now, even after everything, there's that whisper of doubt. Was our beginning too rooted in someone else's ending? I turn to face him, this man who stepped into the void left by betrayal and helped me build something solid where quicksand used to be. "Not a single one," I tell him, and mean it entirely. Though next time we get married, let's skip the dramatically public ceremony and go straight to the Thai food and dishwasher proposals. "Next time?" he laughs. "Planning on trading up already?" "Nah," I say, pulling him closer. "I already married the best man. And this time, I mean it in every possible way. 5 years after the wedding that wasn't, life has settled into a rhythm I never could have predicted. Our crisis management firm has become the go-to for high-profile disasters across 3 states. We even hired a dedicated revenge consultant who specializes in helping people channel their anger into productive outcomes rather than public meltdowns. Learn from my mistakes and all that. Rachel got married last year, a low-key beach ceremony where she made everyone promise no dramatic revelations, even if you caught the groom making out with the officiant this morning. She's expecting their first child in the spring. Michael and I are designated godparents, a responsibility I find simultaneously terrifying and touching. As for us, Michael and I bought the little craftsman house we'd been eyeing for years. It has a garden that's slowly becoming less disaster and more design under my surprisingly green thumb. I never thought I'd be the type to get excited about heirloom tomatoes, but people change, sometimes for the better. We chose not to have children, a decision that feels right for us but still raises eyebrows at family gatherings. My mother has mostly accepted it, though she occasionally sighs dramatically while holding other people's babies in my vicinity. "Subtle, Mom. Do you think it's because of what happened?" she asked once, after too much wine at Thanksgiving. "Are you afraid of bringing children into a world where people can hurt you like that?" I considered lying to make her feel better. Instead, I told her the truth. "No, it's because I've built a life I love exactly as it is. I don't need to add to it to feel complete." She nodded slowly, understanding dawning. "You know, that's probably healthier than my reasons for having you." We laughed, and that was that. The ghost of what might have been finally exorcised from our mother-daughter relationship. David moved back to town last year. I heard about it through the inevitable grapevine. Apparently, Chicago didn't work out, nor did his second engagement. He's working at his father's company now, having failed to advance as quickly as he'd expected elsewhere. Sometimes the universe delivers poetic justice without any help from us. We ran into each other at a charity auction 3 months ago, the awkward encounter I'd been both dreading and morbidly curious about for years. He looked older, softer around the edges, with new lines around his eyes that spoke of disappointments I hadn't caused. "Danielle," he said, with a nod that acknowledged our shared history without inviting discussion. "David," I replied, matching his tone. We might have left it at that, a brief, civilized acknowledgement before retreating to opposite ends of the ballroom. But something made me stay put. Curiosity, maybe. Or perhaps the realization that this man who had once been the center of my universe now felt like a stranger, a character from a book I'd read long ago. "I hear your firm is doing well," he offered, clearly searching for neutral territory. "It is. Building something from scratch has been illuminating." He winced slightly at my word choice. "I suppose I deserved that." "Not what I meant, actually," I said, surprising myself with the truth of it. I was just making conversation. The silence that followed held years of unspoken words. I studied him objectively, this man I'd once believed was my future. He looked diminished somehow, not just physically but essentially, a person who'd never quite recovered from a public unmasking. "For what it's worth," he finally said, eyes fixed somewhere over my shoulder. "I've regretted it. Every day. Not just getting caught, but what I did to you, who I was back then. 5 years earlier, I would have killed for that admission. 3 years earlier, I would have dismissed it as too little, too late. But standing there, in my carefully chosen gown with my successful business and my solid marriage to a man who had never given me reason to doubt him, I found I didn't need David's regret anymore. Didn't need his approval or his absence or anything from him at all. "I appreciate you saying that," I said simply. He nodded, seeming to understand that forgiveness wasn't being offered, just acknowledgement. As he turned to leave, I found myself adding, "I hope you find what you're looking for, David." "Genuinely," he looked back, surprise evident in his expression. "Even after everything?" "Especially after everything," I replied. "Life's too short to stay stuck in old stories, even really dramatic ones that go viral." A ghost of his old smile flickered across his face. "You always were better than me, Danielle." "No," I corrected him. "Just luckier in what I learned from our mistakes." He left shortly after, and I rejoined Michael, who had been watching our interaction from a careful distance, ready to intervene if needed, but trusting me to handle my own past. "You okay?" he asked, sliding an arm around my waist. "Better than okay," I said, realizing it was true. "I think I finally got the closure I didn't know I still needed. Sometimes life is generous that way, offering you the endings you didn't think to ask for." Last month, I received an email that made me laugh out loud in the middle of a client meeting. The subject line read, "From one revenge bride to another." The message was from a woman in Australia who had found my story through some internet rabbit hole and wanted me to know that she'd been inspired to call off her own wedding to a serial cheater. "No dramatic ceremony swap," she wrote. "Just a simple cancellation and a very honest group email to our guests explaining exactly why. The freedom I feel is indescribable. Thank you for showing me it was possible to choose myself." I forwarded it to Rachel with the comment, Our influence is international. Her response, we should franchise. She was joking, but it got me thinking about legacy, about the ripple effects of our choices that extend far beyond our immediate circle. How my very public moment of rage and retribution had somehow translated years and miles later into another woman's quiet act of self-respect. There's something profound in that translation. Something that validates not just what I did, but how I've chosen to carry it forward. The revenge itself was satisfying, yes, spectacularly so. But the real victory wasn't in publicly humiliating David, or reclaiming the wedding day, or even in the viral fame that followed. The victory was in refusing to make myself smaller to accommodate someone else's betrayal. In demanding honesty even when it was messy. In believing I deserved better than pretty lies. That's the lesson I hope ripples outward, not marry the best man to spite your cheating fiancé, but choose truth over comfort when the world offers you the choice. Michael finds me in our garden sometimes, lost in thought as I tend to the stubborn roses I've finally coaxed into blooming. He jokes that I have the same expression deadheading flowers as I did dismantling my ex's life in front of 200 guests. Focused, he says. Like nothing could stop you once you've decided what needs cutting away. He's not wrong. Whether it's relationships or roses, knowing what to prune makes all the difference in what thrives. Last week, my original engagement ring, the one I'd returned to David during the aftermath, arrived in a small package at our office. No note, just the diamond solitaire nestled in tissue paper. David's mother's doing, I suspect. Her way of finally closing the circle. I considered selling it, donating it. Even briefly entertained the petty thought of having it reset into a necklace as some sort of trophy. Instead, I took it to a jeweler friend and had it completely transformed. Stones reset into a new design, gold melted and recast into something I'd never seen before. "What are you going to do with it?" Michael asked when I showed him the finished piece. "Give it to Rachel's daughter someday," I decided. With a very long story about how her godmother once burned her whole life down to discover what was truly fireproof. Michael laughed, pulling me close. "You're something else, Danielle Jenkins." "That's Danielle Cohen Jenkins to you," I corrected, using the hyphenated name we'd chosen together. "The woman who didn't marry the best man just to spite her cheating fiancé." "Oh?" he asked, eyebrow raised. "Why did you marry him then?" I smiled, thinking of all the twists and turns that had brought us from that explosive garden ceremony to our quiet, blooming backyard. How revenge had unexpectedly delivered me to redemption. How the worst day of my life had ultimately led me to some of my best. "Because he turned out to actually be the best man," I said simply. "And that made all the difference."